Hello out there. I'm the oldest nerd, and once again we have a visitor from the east. I don't know how east you are, actually. This is my friend O. We've been friends for a long time and colleagues for about as long. And we are talking movies. And this time we're going to talk about war movies because as kids, that's all we had. You know, we had the plastic soldiers, right? And we had the GI Joe and things like this, and give us a couple of trucks and a pile of dirt, and that's what they did with all young boys. And
True.
so war movies were always interesting because there was a lot of action, and the acting usually was pretty good because they always had the all-star cast. When you
Yeah.
say
Oh
it's a
God. You're exactly right. Two of the films with the uh, biggest, largest all-star cast that you can think of is The Longest Day and A
yeah,
Bridge Too Far. Yeah, just oh,
yes,
fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
and there have been others. Yeah, Bridge Too Far was one, and even things like Kelly's Heroes, which we'll be talking about this time, had a cast. If they weren't stars then, they are now, and well cast. So that's what we start out with. We were talking earlier about In Harm's Way. This was one of my favorites. It was a 1965 film directed by Otto Preminger, and it was in black and white. So it gave you, I guess they were able to mix in stock footage of battles and things like this. Although you sent me something the other day that said they used a lot of models that were about, what, 20
Right.
feet long models for their aircraft carrier and things like that.
They did not. It's funny. You look at Midway from like 75,
Yeah.
where they used a lot of stock footage, but this film, you can always tell the grain increases. You can see the grain in the
Mm-hmm.
film when they go to the stock footage, and when they're jumping out, when John Wayne is up there helping them get out for the. He's up there in the plane with the paratroopers, and there's a shot of a plane where that standard transport plane DC-3.
Yes.
Anyway,
Called it a C-47, I think. Yeah.
right, and you can see that's a stock footage. So I'm thinking the ships maybe, but then those ships are looking so good. And I had in the behind the scene on Tora Tora Tora, that's where I first time I'd ever seen that they built instead of the classic 3 foot models. This director, and of course this is before Tora Tora Tora. So they get the bigger models because they react. I mean, I'm talking bigger models, 30, 40 foot models where it's funny in those pictures. It's funny to watch the engineers standing in the boat. You can see how big the ships are, and they are, and those big models. You can put them in a lake. I can't remember what they there was a lake that they filmed in, and you
Yeah.
can see the clouds and the horizon and those big ships, and you're going, this feels like stock footage. This is real Navy stuff.
We'll
And
stick
yet,
some of those
no, it's
pictures
their
up.
own.
Yeah.
Say it again.
We'll
Say it
stick
again.
we'll stick some of those pictures up
Yeah. Oh,
so you
perfect,
can you can see
perfect.
what we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. And
Yeah.
and but and so you're going to, but then you're also going. This battle never took place. Um, the Yamato, um, the big battleship, they hardly ever used it. Japan hardly ever used it. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf, they did pull it out and used it then. But this is a battle that really never took place. So I'm thinking, how did they get this? Where did they get the stock footage from? Because it's really, I've never seen a battle quite like this. And of course, there really was not a battle quite like that. It was fictional. Um, and then just the way everything works, the actual shots, the firing, the proximity of the ships, it really works well. And I thought it worked well at night and in the day. What do you think about the nighttime shots? Oh,
Uh,
day for night, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I was impressed with all of it. I thought that was probably, as far as effects were concerned, one of the most believable films with all of the models and things like that. And they're the only ones that really used real models of Japanese ships, where everything else was just kind of put in the background, so you wouldn't notice that it was just another American ship. But
That's a good point. They profiled the Yamato pretty well, and I love the historical accuracy.
yeah,
When Kirk Douglas flies over them and he says, "This thing is big and it's got 18-inch guns," and he's exactly right. I mean, it was an amazing ship. They built three of those suckers, and the Musashi was one, and then they built one that was turned into an aircraft carrier at the end of the war.
yeah, yeah.
Super
The
battleships.
One of the things I like the best about this film is the name they gave for John Wayne. He usually had one of these real macho sounding names, and this had to take the cake for that. Rockwell Torrey, and they called him Rock. So I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't get any better than that unless they called him, Steel or Sterling or something. I mean, that was
Yeah.
the kind of thing.
No, they didn't
But
do a contrast type thing.
no, no. But
Oh,
I mean, in every film he always played kind of him. But
yeah.
this fit him pretty well, and the other characters in this I thought were just they are all perfect. I mean, they seem to be perfectly cast, especially Dana
Oh,
Andrews as the Broderick, who was John Wayne's nemesis throughout the film. He was a congressman that went to war for the publicity of it, and was treated with kid gloves all the way through it. And there's a wonderful line in there by Henry Fonda, who plays. They don't say in the film who he was, but basically was playing Admiral Nimitz, I think. And
good point.
yeah,
Yeah.
when they promote Tory to admiral, and give him basically this mission that they should have given to Broderick, said, well, how are we going to do this? And he says, well, I can't relieve Broderick on this, so you're just going to have to go in and do it. He said, well, what kind of leeway do I have? And he says, well, you can't kill him. In a, that Henry Fonda
Exactly.
voice, you can't kill him. So one of the
That's,
best lines in the film.
no. Oh, this gets into, speaking of lines in the film, but this gets into into more of the story, the plot, where Rock's John Wayne's son. The actor is, I believe his first name is Brandon DeWitt. He
Um,
played
DeWild, yeah,
the Wild.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, he
Jer they
played.
called it.
The first time I saw him was in HUD, where he plays the grandfather's the grandson,
Yeah,
and just an innocent, nice, sweet kid in that film. Kind of has, boy, it's a different part this time,
this time he's
but
a
then he does.
spoiled college boy
Oh,
because
spoil.
they mention the backstory that Rock was originally married to some socialite
Right.
and divorced him for whatever reason, and so the son was raised mostly by her, and so he was raised in high society and probably went to Ivy League school or a prep school or something like that, and so now he's working for the congressman, and so that's he's kind of hitched his wagon to this guy who's in this movie pretty much a loser.
Right, and kind of the kid's kind of a snake. What he's hitched his, you're right, hitched his
Yeah,
star. He even doesn't really. And the first time you really, well, when and of course John Wayne has never. There were lots of nice nuances in this film.
yeah,
John
really,
Wayne, you kind of question. He totally decided not to stay in touch with his son whatsoever. Does not know his son. He didn't even know his son was in the Navy.
right. Much
When
less under his own command. Yeah,
Right, exactly. And so you're kind of thinking, and you can tell with Patricia O'Neill, the nurse that kind of falls for John Wayne, she does kind of think a little bit, what kind of man would completely lose track of with his own son?
yeah,
What went wrong? And so you eventually kind of find out what went wrong, but it still leaves a little bit of doubt on John Wayne, a little bit of shades of gray. Why, how did, and John Wayne would probably admit that I should have stayed in touch with my own kid at some
probably
point. He
so.
kind of
He was married to his job when he was demoted after the Pearl Harbor incident. He took it like a good soldier.
right,
Didn't challenge it or anything like that, and eventually that leads to his being, promoted to admiral.
right, that
But
he didn't
but
challenge it. Yeah,
yeah, but it was his real dedication was to his career. He didn't care much about anything else.
yeah, and he didn't like that socialite way back
Yeah,
up east type mentality. That whole that whole crowd. He didn't like that, yeah, and then just divorced the wife along with his son, or she divorced him. And but anyway, they split. So the son, two little quick lines reminded me of when you mentioned a good line. For one thing, the son really does not. When they first meet again in Hawaii, the son they're talking about World War II, the war, the reasons for the war a little bit, and the son calls it a trumped up war. This trumped up war,
Yeah.
and that does not wear well with John Wayne. And he said,
Yeah.
I ought to throw you off this pier with the fishes," and so we can kind of tell the real different type of person the son is
Right.
versus Rock.
And of
And
course, every war film that was made during the 60s and 70s was about Vietnam, really.
That's
You know,
that's it. And look at this coming
essentially.
out in '65.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a you're right. Maybe we're starting to get the sense that, of course, back in '65, the like 65% of the public in 1965, not 1968, but 65% of the public, I think 60% maybe felt like
Yeah.
we were justified. We need to be there. We need to support South Vietnam. We need to South Vietnam. We need to stop communism in '65. So yeah, you get when the kid says trumped up war, you're kind of thinking, oh come on, kid, this is World War II. But you're right. It's also
Yeah.
a commentary to a point on Vietnam.
They
The
did
other
the
line
same
that
thing
gets
in
me,
MASH and in Kelly's Heroes. They were basically making World War II kind of a fig leaf for Vietnam.
exactly. That's exactly right. Because yeah, 65, and that's a great point. None of the no, there's really no scholarship. I don't think. That's easy for me to. I need to look up more. I did some research into In Harm's Way, but I don't think there's a lot of certainly the Green Berets. Definitely, there's a lot of scholarship on that with John
Well,
Wayne. Same John Wayne, just a couple of years later, making a pro Vietnam War, which there's not
in
many of those
set in the Vietnam War, and it was a flop.
set in the
I mean,
Vietnam.
you know, it
Right,
wasn't until Apocalypse Now that they were able to really bring a Vietnam era movie to popularity.
right. With that, and before that, they had to use World War II as that fig leaf. That's
Yeah.
well put.
Well,
And
you know, something to be said though about that movie was that George Takei was in it. He actually had to leave production of Star Trek for a short period of time in order to be one of the co-stars with John Wayne in that.
Was that one of the reasons we got Chekhov? That he
No,
was
no,
gone?
no. But that was the reason that you would see sometimes the red shirt sitting in Sulu's
Exactly.
chair.
Yeah. There were. I could go. Well, I'll stay
Yeah,
away from
yeah. We
Star
can
Trek
go
for
into
that.
sci-fi again, but
But yeah, I was thinking the other reason was that Russia felt. Well, I guess the biggest reason Russia felt basically said to Gene Roddenberry, "You're trying to represent the entire world, and there's no Russian on this ship." And Gene Roddenberry took him seriously and put in Chekhov. I
yeah.
think it's a yeah. That was
He
right.
also and made him look like Davy Jones.
That's exactly right. Yep, yep. With the other.
Walter
Do you
Koenig
want
was
to talk a little bit
balding
about
even then. It was a hairpiece that he wore so he would look like Davy Jones
Davy
of
Jones
the Monkees.
of the Monkees?
Yeah,
Do you want to mention the Kirk Douglas? Talk about the Kirk Douglas character a
sure.
little bit because
We're talking
yeah,
about cast in this, and of course, you know, John Wayne was great. Kirk Douglas kind of plays against type in this.
yes,
He's a drunkard. He's let's see, how can we put this in a family video? He does take some liberties with the ladies.
that's well put. That's it.
Mm.
And but he's a close friend. John Wayne has mentored him.
Yep.
They've had this crusty friendship, and older man, a little bit younger man, but both of them are nobody's in their 30s at all. At this, Kirk Douglas is probably in his 40s by now, and you can tell he's maybe a little past his prime in terms,
Yeah.
and certainly with his own actions being an alcoholic, that has put him to the side.
They kind of
And
put that into the film, and I love the scene where he's in a thatched hut with some woman, and they finally find him and said he's being called to headquarters. And so, he gets in his uniform, goes to headquarters, and a very lackadaisical base commander hardly even looks at him and says, you are ordered and requested to report as Chief of Staff to Admiral Rockwell Torrey. You want to take it? And his reaction to that is, wait, what? Admiral,
Yeah,
how did that happen? And, the commander looks up at him and says, you want to take it or not? So,
yeah, exactly. And then he runs off.
Yes.
He's excited to take. And so, yeah, for a lot of the film, you really do think this is a loyal friend. And there are elements that, that certainly Kirk Douglas, loyalty to John Wayne, very competent, but also a side underneath him, a boiling, dangerous side that
yes,
Patricia O'Neill sees.
And it comes out, and
it comes out,
leads him to want to atone for that. And at the end of it, Rock says no recommendation, without explanation, but everybody
no recommendation. He wasn't doing that. He wasn't there. What did he say? But he wasn't there.
He didn't do that. Yeah, he didn't do that for medals. Yeah.
For medals. He did that to atone for one of the most vicious rape scenes you're going to see in a film.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's true.
Yeah, that
true.
And I can't. You think this film would have been rated M?
Yeah,
back
it
in
would
the day?
have if the ratings system would not come out for another year. So
it was so close to coming out. Yeah, where you get the M for mature. Yeah, that's exactly
66
other
or
than
67.
Right, that's exactly right. And so and this line, and of course, and so when you and so for a lot of the film, you're kind of sympathetic to Kirk Douglas, and when he what he does at the end does help to atone, but but Kirk Douglas, of course, can't stand John Wayne, can't stand Rock's kid that is just leeching his way, holding on, trying to not fight the war that he calls a trumped up war. The kid calls it a trumped up war, and he's trying to not fight the war and just be as bad as his protege. And of course, Kirk Douglas sees that, and he can't believe it's John Wayne's son. And he says one of the most amazing lines.
But there is, of course, the atonement there. Where Jer finds out the real McCoy is Rock, and so he changes. And
it was a nice change.
It was, and they say
there's no one scene that just by his actions, Jer changes.
And tell me that in any kind of good film, you have to have a situation where a key character changes his outlook, right?
Right.
It wouldn't be a film if it wasn't somebody that started one place and ended up another. And,
a good character arc in a
Torrey
supporting
was going to be
character.
wherever he was when he started, and he pretty much was. But and so was Kirk Douglas for that matter, despite his best efforts. But
well put.
Jer is the person that actually was the character to focus on, I suppose.
It's true. He's the one that changes the most when you think, and I think he gets maybe fourth billing. But he changes. Yeah, when you really look at a character arc, that's it. And you all of a sudden it happens so subtly that all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, he's reacting differently than he did, and basically he leaves Patrick O'Neill. Of course Dana Andrews is the real but Patrick O'Neill is just as bad working for Dana Andrews.
Well, yeah.
And the kid was and the kid was
you're right. I was
O'Neill
mixing up Dana Andrews and Patrick O'Neill. Patrick O'Neill was really the congressman there, wasn't he? So
I think so. That's a little confusing in the since they're so similar. It's Patrick O'Neill's kind of like the chief of staff for Dana Andrews, and it was kind of funny. He definitely did not want to go to the front. Patrick O'Neill was like, the admiral, no, you need to go to the front.
We're talking Patrick O'Neill, and I'm trying to. I only had the brief upper casting. He was lower down than he should have. Yeah, Commander Neil Owen. That was the one that was the real. Yeah, Broderick was the kind of the nemesis, but Owen was the person that was standing between Jer and Rock. I wanted to talk about some of the side characters. George Kennedy was in this. He's been in every film that I've ever seen, it seems like. But actually only 2 war films that I know of. And one was The Dirty Dozen, where he plays an observer in the war games. And in this one, he's Colonel Gregory in this, in a very bit part on it, but still. And Carroll O'Connor was in this too. He was also in Kelly's Heroes, and he plays Lieutenant Commander Burke. And I think that's also kind of a bit part. This was a year, let's see, this was maybe 10 years before All in the Family came along. So
that's wrong. That's right. That's exactly.
Before that, he was mostly a guy that played small parts in war movies. Larry Hagman was on this too.
The captain of the ship who dies. He was terrific. It's funny, and a very different part than basically he's playing Archie Bunker in Kelly's Heroes. Archie Bunker as a general.
Well, that was a year before. That was a year before All in the Family came out.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That was in Kelly's Heroes. So that's kind of gave you a little taste of what he was going to be. But let's see who else was in here. Larry Hagman was a lieutenant. Burgess Meredith, of course, was a big part in there. He was, I think, he was on Pretorius' staff.
Right, and he was a spy. He was the intelligence,
right.
And Rock.
You're right.
Yeah, Rock is going, I thought you guys just you go to parties and stay up all night and you never seem to do anything. Yep. But then later on, as Operation Skyhook, we learned and it was really well planned operation. I think it was basically, I'm trying to think of the islands that would correspond from real World War II islands to this entire mission. It was more like World War II-ish instead of necessarily straight up historical match, but still it was fantastic. It had, it had really authenticity to it. And
I don't think there was actually an island known as Gamabutu. And I think where they were, and that's something they did a lot in the World War II movies. They didn't use actual locations except in MacArthur, because MacArthur was so much part of Corregidor in the Philippines that they had to use actual locations. But in these, where you have these generals that didn't exist, you've got to give them fake missions too, I guess.
Good point. And one of the best lines of the film, another really good line, I just loved it, was and it was so real. It was when Burgess Meredith was scared to death. It's before the final battle, and he's scared to death. He says, "I'm just walking around. I'm shaking." And he looks up to Rock and he says, "Are you scared?" And Rock says, "Or do you really love the battle?" And Rock says, "Battles are fought by men who are scared and wish they were somewhere else." And that's such a good line.
It is a good line.
John Wayne says, "I'm scared too," and he gives that line, and wow. And then they go into, terrific battle. But and the other one little thought, Patricia O'Neal, I thought one of the best matched leading ladies for John Wayne. Their age was right. There wasn't a mismatch. She's got the old salt, air to her. They both have seen a lot of life. They both have been disappointed. They both have given a lot, not necessarily received a lot. And yet they've managed to be there to tell the tale. And it was a perfect pairing. I had just finished Rio Bravo with Angie Dickinson, and that was made like 7 years prior. But still, you can tell Angie Dickinson is 20 years younger, or at least 15 than John Wayne.
They've done that in so many things in the movies where the wives or girlfriends are like 20 years younger than the main character. And
right. But this felt right. Their personality, their outlook on life, their age, it was just perfect.
Or in the case of, let's see, Sally Field played Tom Hanks' mother, and they were like the same age in
That's true. And then there's that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens less often. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does happen. Anyway, I do like this because I feel like that Patricia O'Neal was kind of the other side of the same character.
Yes.
You take a Rock, who was the career Navy guy who was married to his job, and you take Patricia Neal, who is the same thing, married to her job.
Yeah, 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 and you're exactly right. The pairing with, and yet, yeah, and yet, it's man, she has a certain wisdom about people too.
Yes.
That John, yeah, John Wayne had missed the. I mean, Rock had missed that with Kirk Douglas, the Kirk Douglas character, and she
Yeah.
caught on. She just, yeah, exactly, and she'll stay by it. He's in a coma for 3 weeks, and but he's after the battle, he's in a coma for 3 weeks, but
Right.
she's going to stay with him and just abuse. What did you think? Two quick questions. What did you think? This is one of the first films to put all of the credits at the end of the film. Now we're used to that, but you remember
Yes.
back in the day,
All the
you'd
credits
see
were at the
all
front, and at the end, all you just saw was the end. And they quit doing
right.
the end after a while because I imagine nobody was watching the credits anyway after a time, and so they were all
But
gone home before you could see the end.
I can't imagine what it would have been like for a very emotional, dramatic film, and it just says the end, and you're supposed to just lights come up and whereas
Well, that
now
was
I really do like the credits at the end. It gives you a chance to recover emotionally from a really good film. And
that
so
was
this
Casablanca. I mean, they uh, Louis and Bogart walk off into the mist, and then the end. That's it.
the
Goodbye.
end, yeah,
Go home.
you're going, what a good line that was. But no, you got to get up and clean up the popcorn, and
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, this has the credit, one of the first films to have long credits at the end, and it uses all these sequences of clouds
Yeah.
and clouds and waves, and then at the very end, it goes into almost a mushroom cloud. With the difference of clouds, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that too is in music by Jerry Goldsmith too,
Oh, of
younger
course.
Jerry Gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's but what
that was something. Some of the criticism on this was that all the women in this movie had '60s hairdos, and in some cases '60s clothing, and except of course in when they're in uniform, and that was kind of once again this idea that it's really just kind of a fig leaf for Vietnam. So this is
it's a great
they're giving you
Kirk
kind of a
Douglas's
subtle.
wife. Yeah, Kirk Douglas's wife, who's not around for very long,
Yeah.
definitely comes out of the 60s. I mean,
Yes.
wow.
Absolutely. Some of
Yeah.
it could be probably the actors didn't want to change their haircuts or things like this, but I think that might have been kind of something under the radar, if you will,
That's a great
by
point.
Preminger.
Yeah, her dancing at that party and Paula Prentice is like, you need to get her husband. She needs, and she's, her dancing out of the 60s is like straight mod 60s dancing, but it's
Yeah.
1941. It's
Right.
December 6th, 1941.
Yeah.
One day before.
But yeah, there were so many good things about this movie, and of course, it was just hours long. But it was certainly something that I can watch over and over and get something different out of it every time.
That's funny. Both of the films that we're talking about, Kelly's Heroes, took criticism also for being, looking at some of the reviews, hearing people, oh, it's a little bit bloated. And it is long too, but I never felt with either one of these films. I never felt like, okay, this is getting long. They're both over 2.5 hours long,
Yeah.
and neither of the films. And so, yeah, Kelly's Heroes also took heat for that too.
Yeah, and of course they had less of a fig leaf because I mean Oddball had to have come right out of the '60s.
Oh,
I mean they had
true.
his everything that he did, plus the fact that I don't know that there was anything that you could play out of a tank in the technology they had at the time. I mean, it would have taken
Although they made that,
it would have taken a tape
Oddball,
player.
right? What is Byron? It would have had to have been a phonograph, but the needle's
Not in
going
a
to
tank,
just
no.
not if you can't go 3 feet with the over the treads. It's not going to work
Yeah.
unless you do what the 1957. I always want to say the Mad Magazine version of a Plymouth. They called them a Plymouth. If you remember them when Mad Magazine would make fun of cars, but a true Plymouth had the record. What it had? It had the
Yeah,
needle was on the bottom and the record was on the top.
right. And
Yeah,
they had it suspended by springs and shocks and all that
right,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
It probably was the most expensive turntable ever made. It probably still didn't play very well if you went over
No,
a rough road. But
I was in one of those cars. I remember looking at it, and I was maybe 12 or no, maybe
yeah,
I was probably 14, 15, and just wow, look at this thing. And I think it only played like 33s.
yeah,
So every 4 minutes, that's as long as it's going to last. But they did. But that's the only way Oddball. So Oddball is this incredible character played by Donald Sutherland in 1970s 19 the film that came out in 1970, Kelly's Heroes. Gotta admit, I mean, it's one on my long list of films I need to watch. You suggested it, and it's fantastic. I had seen maybe some bits and pieces, but watching it's incredible. What a
yes,
film! And Donald Sutherland playing in a sense a similar role from MASH, Oddball plays Oddball, this tank mechanic, no, tank commander, three Shermans,
yeah,
and it's totally comes out of time. I mean, the film's set in 1944, like fall
yeah,
of 44 after
yes.
D-Day, and they're in France. But Oddball is straight up from 1970, and
That's
his
true.
entire little harem. He's got a harem, three Shermans. He's some of the best lines. Where Oddball has decided. I had that part of the script. You remember what Oddball says? He's not gonna his commander had been decapitated by a big German gun, the 88.
Yeah,
That was a famous German gun. And Oddball says, don't mourn him. He'd been charging ahead, risking all our lives. He said, I consider we're back here in reserve. In case the Germans do a counterattack, we'll have my little subunit back
yeah.
here.
On New York,
Yeah, to
waiting for
protect
that.
France, maybe New York. Yeah. And then they were certainly enjoying themselves waiting for the German counterattack.
Yeah. Otherwise, just laying out on their lounge chairs and having wine and whatever.
Can
But
you think of a better mismatch when you look at Clint Eastwood? We all know Clint Eastwood. Don't have
yeah,
to describe his visage, who he is as a person. 1944, Clint Eastwood is playing a character in a lot of respects from 1944, except Vietnam definitely is there, even with Clint Eastwood's motivations,
yeah.
like what he decides to do in this film. But the mismatch of Oddball and Clint Eastwood is just priceless.
But
Watching them,
they work because Oddball says
it works.
I'm not that crazy to go in and fight with any tigers, and Eastwood says, well, you're not going to go in alone. I'm going to be leading the way, and he says, well, those kind of positive waves, you got to go. So they worked out, but
Oh, totally.
the I believe Telly Savalas probably made this picture because he first of all was a foil to Oddball and to Don Rickles. Crap Game.
Right.
He called Crap Game Hustler and didn't even want him on the mission, but Crap Game was going to watch after his investment. And in the case of Oddball, he just didn't have any respect for him at all and let him know it.
Right.
And
Yeah, and you've got to have a glue that at some point this film needed some glue to hold the whole thing together. And
yeah,
Telly Savalas is that glue. Absolutely.
very much so, very much so. And of course, Rickles is good to just do his
Oh,
bit of someone that's just on the cynical side of it all. And
and good
then you
acting on his part too.
and
There's
you
that.
have the
Yeah.
two yokels that of course he can play off of as well.
Right. Right. That's
And
exactly.
even they react with Telly Savalas, where he brings them all to attention and he says, "Everybody, listen up." And one of them says, "You bet your boots, buddy," and he says, "Sergeant." Yeah, Sarge, and just back in line. So
Didn't expect that.
no,
Yeah, I watched that part again last night and just didn't. What was so? What B? What are some of your favorite scenes in this film? There's some standout scenes. One, just to get you started. One, and I know you hadn't seen the film for a good while, but you quoted it line for line. It's Don Rickles interacting with the yokels after
Yeah,
was it Don Rickles
yeah.
that
It's
they've
a
been
it's a classic scene. They're already in uh, the city where the bank is, and it's being
where the
guarded
bank
by
is.
three Tiger tanks, and they are hiding behind buildings, shooting their own tank guns at them, and the rest of everybody is just kind of scampering around trying to hide. And Rickles gets behind an outhouse, and the outhouse gets hit. And so he's walking
Right.
back to where the others are, and one of the yokels says to him, and there's two of them together, says, "You smell like a dung heap." And he says, Shh, "Makes you feel at home, doesn't it?" And he walks on. And the yokel says to the other one, "Kind of does, doesn't it?" And I love
So
that line.
Rickles is trying to be brilliantly sarcastic. He's the one that smells like a dung heap, but he's trying to throw it right back on the other guys.
Yeah,
And kind of makes you feel it. And when we were talking about this film, getting ready for it, and you
yeah.
saw it, I had just seen it. And I'm trying like, what a line! And
It
then
really
you
was a
just
line.
recited it like that. That's oh, got any more? Is there another scene that stands out? That
One of the early ones, basically in the early part where they're being bombed by their own people. You
oh
know,
yeah,
Mulligan's
oh
mortars
yeah,
are going to the wrong place, and he's on the phone saying, "No, the Germans aren't here. We're here." And then Big Joe, Telly Savalas, goes off to meet
right,
with Captain Maitland, and he's talking to his buddy and saying, "What should we do? Should we try to get out of here?" And he says, "Well, we can't do anything until Big Joe tells us what to do." And he says, "Well, as much as I respect Big Joe, I don't want to get killed, or I don't want to be taken prisoner. I'm first generation Italian. They would shoot me as a
right.
traitor." So I liked that scene in there. It was just kind
That
of
was a great scene to
yeah,
be. Yeah, and the tactical knowledge and also just the social knowledge. Of course, these writers would have been much closer to the war than we are now, but
probably.
they put that in there, and that first generation Italian. That was a super line, and
Yeah,
yeah, that really stands out. And so, yeah, just to get a little bit of background, and the background connects to the Vietnam aspect, and it connects to the sense of betrayal. So many betrayals. They are when we first meet this company with Telly Savalas' company, they are being shelled by friendly fire. And the incoming friendly fire, and of course, what we determined like 30-40% of casualties came from friendly fire. That
yeah.
and of course, when making in a 1943 World War II film would not really be talking about that. But here we are in 1970, and we're talking about the friendly fire. And the
Yes, and of
guy
course
almost doesn't care.
Mulligan was who was the one shooting the mortars in the wrong place was George
Right.
Savalas, played Stavros in Kojak, and
That's right.
yeah, and he had the great line too. "If I knew what I was doing, would I be here?
That's
Would I
right.
be
Yeah.
here?"
So yeah, we're starting the movie. Friendly fire's coming in.
Yeah,
Another thing at the beginning of the film, for those of you that have not seen it, it's don't be like me and wait till you're somewhere in your 60s to to watch Kelly's. Give yourself the treat way earlier. But so many betrayals. The captain of this squad, all he cares about is getting a yacht. It's a big boat, but it truly is a yacht, a classic wooden, exquisite,
yeah, sailboat. Yeah,
maybe, yeah, a yacht. That how am I going to get? His biggest concern is not how to protect his men, but how am I going to get? How am I going to fly this home? How am I going to get this into a B-17 and somehow get this thing home? That's his number one concern. So
right.
there's a
So of course,
betrayal on
when
that
Big Joe
level.
comes back, he says he gives the report on what the captain says. And they said, "How did he get that job?" He said, "It's simple. His the general is his uncle." That was
That's
said it
exactly
all out.
right.
And then of course
And,
he that's let's see, his name is who is playing Maitland, Hal Buckley. Don't know of him, but he plays well against Carol O'Connor as General
who
General
is
Culp.
also betraying his men because Carol O'Connor just wants to be the biggest, fiercest, most recognized general, and he's living a life of luxury.
Yeah,
Absolute pajamas, robes, breakfast. People serve him breakfast. Where am I going to put this breakfast, sir? Yeah, I mean, he just wants the fame, and
Yeah.
so
When he finds out about the procession there, he's running to the radio room, and he's trying to tune the radio, pushes the radio operator out of the way. I got this, and then Maitland comes in with the shopping from Paris or something, and he says, leave me alone, Maitland. I got the game on.
it's complete
Yeah.
exactly, and I didn't realize that was Maitland until the second viewing. He's got so many presents from Paris. So
Yes.
yeah, lingerie, perfume, chocolate, all the important things. And Paris has probably been taken maybe only 2 weeks ago, I'm gathering. It's not like 2 years later, and it's everything is immediate. And he went shopping, and nobody's caring for the ordinary GIs. Those ordinary regular GIs have got to they realize they're in it for themselves. They've got to take care of themselves, and of course that becomes the big plot point of the film. Is when we get we find this German intelligence officer.
Yeah.
Eastwood somehow knows to bring this German intelligence officer in, and it's almost like Eastwood knew he would find something special from the German intelligence officer. And in the interrogation of that intelligence officer, here's a guy who's not intelligence. He's not going to tell Eastwood anything, but he ends up telling Eastwood everything, and Eastwood is able to make him talk almost by not trying to make him talk.
Yeah. Well, he was really not an agent. He was just an accountant or something, I think is what the deal was. And his Jeep ran out of gas or something, and that's how they caught him. And
why is your briefcase so heavy?
Yeah,
so that
bars,
it's yeah, but it's gold bars, and all of a sudden Eastwood snaps, and it's like, and it's funny how fast the very mention of some that you could get personally some sort of security after the war. Not just one person mentions, I'm not going to, after getting all this gold, that becomes the plot of the movie. There's $16 million worth of gold in a bank, Nazi gold in a bank behind enemy lines. And the Nazis basically don't have a way to get it out. And it's lying there, waiting to be taken. And these guys, these ordinary Joes who've been abandoned and not just abandoned, they've been lied to and mistreated by all their superiors who are in their own way taking advantage of the war. These guys instantly realize, hey, I've got a chance to get something for me, and it doesn't. And it's funny, nobody's even ever says, like Don Rickles never really what is this. Of course he sees the gold, but they all just believe instantly that this is something that they can.
Well, even one gold bar is a great thing. I mean, that's what
it doesn't take a lot of arguing.
That's what they gave to Mulligan, and I love the scene where they have, they have mortar fire sent out unauthorized in order to cover them as they move forward, and you have an alarm clock goes off. Mulligan grabs the gold bar and yells "fire," and then looks at it, and then takes the radio,
and then he has to get the phone. And he, that's exactly right. Just brilliant.
And it didn't it wasn't a usual mortar spread. It was everything they had. And so
it was, that reminds me, two quick things. I'll just go with the only person that needed convincing was Telly Savalas. It was like he was a true hero. He was trying to get these guys. And his motivation was certainly, he wanted to fight Nazis at a certain point. You realize
he did,
but he really wanted to bring those guys alive out of the war.
They had kind of a shady part of him, at least for the time, that when he comes in and he said, "What are you bringing this cigar chewing moron in for?" to Kelly. And Kelly says to him, "If you thought I was going to bring young boys for you, Joe, you went to the wrong guy."
That's right.
Also, his interaction with Private Babra, who he calls Barbara.
That was hilarious.
Why are you calling me Barbara? That's your name, is it? It's Babra.
I prefer you not call me that. Barbara. Yeah. So but he
They don't hit
really
it
wants
again, but
these
they
guys.
mention that, and you know, it doesn't appear to have any effect on how well he fights or has a command. But that's interesting that they put that in
Yeah, it was. That's
even in
exactly. And
1971.
1970, and so all of the arguments of how, how this is something for us, we can get something out of this war. They don't go into it a lot, but it's that one scene where they have to convince Joe. They got to convince Joe to go on this mission because Joe has got to go on this mission with them.
Because
And I
they've
got to
gone on
admit,
several rotations. They haven't had a break. This is the first time they've had any break since they hit the beach at Normandy.
right,
And so he did not want to send these people out to get killed just for money
right,
until he found out how
right.
much money it was going to be.
And he sees what it means to him. I mean, you can tell
Yeah,
they, and he really, and then he gets confirmation from every key officer. Are you really in this? All right, what about you? What do you say? And they
yeah,
all nod. They all give their assent. And then finally, he says, "Okay, I'm all in."
yeah.
And that, but I've never seen a film that where you'll think of maybe a film like Waterworld, and you think, how much did they spend on this? Do we really see the money being spent? This film, you can see every bit of this budget. I mean,
Yes.
it's when you mentioned how what's his name, Telly Savalas' son that lays out the mortar fire on that
Oh,
town,
yeah. That's his brother actually. That's
brother.
yeah. That was oh goodness, Mulligan.
Mulligan, right? I mean, the town, they didn't spare anything. So Yugoslavia is a great place to shoot. You are going to get the bang for the buck, literally in Yugoslavia. When they're driving through these three. At this point, there's just a at this point is before they became a whole infantry brigade. They're just three vehicles at this point going through the little town,
Yeah,
trying to get behind enemy lines to the bank. So they're on the way to do this, and this entire town blows up. And there's a flying one. You can see it coming. There's a at an intersection. You can see one German, and everything looks pretty authentic. One German car is coming, and Clint Eastwood's coming this way. And just before they crash, a shell hits the German car, and boom! I mean, everything looked great. The effects were incredible. The pyrotechnics, the budget for it was fantastic. The budget had to be, it was a significant film. I
yeah.
mean, you got stars.
Let's see if I
It's
have
interesting.
a note on that.
And this
Uh,
goes back. Oh yeah, what you got on that? What you
I'm
got on that?
checking. You go ahead, and I'll get it back to you.
Okay. Well, I was reading it. It kind of this film is one of the last of the A where you got an A picture and a B picture,
Yeah.
and this actually, in some respects, especially where Eagles Dare could have been another film related to this same director, could have been a B picture, and the B picture is where you got aging stars cast against young actors on the way up, and Clint Eastwood. Well, he was established, pretty well established by then, but on the other hand, you can also look at him as being on the way up, especially in Where Eagles Dare, where you got Richard Burton, kind of a little bit
Yeah.
aging and casting it. And so you got the A picture and the B picture. Same thing with directors. But this, I don't know if would have been it feels like it had too big a budget to be a big B picture. On the other hand, though, they're
Okay.
shooting in
4 million. It's a 4 million budget. It grossed 5,200,000.
I'll be darned. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did better afterwards.
Yeah.
It made its money in foreign markets. It made its money in later distribution, but the
Yes.
initial rush, it barely recovered its costs. When you look at that, yeah, it's yeah. I think MASH did much better. Speaking of World War II Vietnam films, or MASH being Korea, but still MASH did much better. And another film that comes up is Catch 22. When people talk about these films,
Yeah.
they put them in World War II films set in World War II, but really about Vietnam. And
Yeah. Yeah. Catch 22 really was, and it was based on a book. And there's I don't know how well it was executed though. When it comes down to it, that the whole idea of Milo and Major and all this. I mean, to this day, I've used the when I'm in, tell them I'm out line and it had a few
Right.
good lines in it, but I don't know that it really did justice to the book, and I just don't know if they did what they intended to do with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and when in most of the discussions, the two films when you're looking at early '70s films that are set in another war, Korea or Vietnam, no, World War II, but they're really about Vietnam.
Yeah,
It's Catch 22 and MASH that comes up. But to me, this film, I think maybe captures this film being Kelly's Heroes,
yeah,
captures the whole thing maybe even better. The just the craziness of the betrayal that comes, perhaps betrayal that comes from the upper crust,
they really don't really care much
from
about
the
the
brass.
men at all. Yeah,
Yeah. And the mid-level brass doesn't care. And it's just the guys fighting for themselves. And those gold bars mean everything. And oh my goodness. And even the German tank commander, that's
yeah.
got to be one of the best
What kind
scenes
of
in
deal do we
history.
make? He says to Crap Game, a deal. Do you think they know
Yeah,
what they're guarding? And they didn't.
they didn't. And Crap Game says maybe he's a Republican, and the Nazi tank commander implying that maybe he would put money, that money would reach him.
Yeah,
And sure enough, they go up there in that imitation. It's there's apparently there's Eastwood has a lot of comments on this film, a lot of thoughts on this film, and
yeah,
I can't remember if he liked that kind of Sergio Leone spaghetti western at the end, because it really changes genre at the when they decide to talk
it
to the
does.
tank commander.
Yeah,
I liked it though. I thought it was great. I loved the change in music, and I thought it was fantastic coming
yeah,
up to the tank.
it did.
And so they go to the tank commander, they talk to him, and he's yet another one. It didn't take. He said, "Well, I have my orders, protect the bank." But it didn't take a lot of convincing for him to turn that Panzer around, turn the turret around,
Yeah,
and I love it because it's a great cut too. Because instead of him thinking, "Well, should I do this or not?" You just, if you could just, Eastwood says, if you just
yeah.
fire
Smash
one
cut to
shot
the
on the,
fire. Yeah,
yeah, you just get to boom. And then they walk up and they see something is covered up by painter's cloth, something like that. What's covered up? They reveal it, and then it's wooden boxes. And even then, you can tell they're thinking, is this real? Until Eastwood busts the box, throws the
yeah,
box down, and in the gold. And then they do the reflections of the gold bars on their faces.
yeah.
And you could just see what it means. It just, they're just in awe of what's happened.
Yeah, yeah, it's unbelievable, and that they made it. It was all in part of that. I thought that worked out well. I thought it
Here's
was a funny postscript on it that Oddball buys the tank from the Germans, and including the uniform. He wears the uniform jacket and the hat, and
That's what Oddball wants.
and of course Moriarty's saying it leaks. It's a piece of junk. So
Right. They offer him a cigarette and he says, no, there's fuel all over the German guy. There's fuel all over the place. No smoke. This is leaking. This tank is busted. All that was left was the turret really to fire. There's a fascinating you remember all those fast cuts at the end where we're
yeah,
intercut, they're looking at the bars of gold, and then we're intercut because Archie Bunker, Carol O'Connor, General Archie Bunker is on the way to just he
right.
wants to be part of and be part of the celebration of this as this incredible unit that he feels like these guys with initiative, they've gone behind the lines, and he wants to congratulate them,
Yeah,
be
even
part
the
of the
gravediggers
celebration.
are in it. Yeah,
Yeah, excuse me, that was incredible. Even the great
it probably had the best what am I looking for? Group. It had probably more good lines than any war movie I've ever seen,
you
including
said it.
the minefield scene where a Crap Game finds a mine, and Telly stops and turns around and says, "What kind is it?" And Rickles pauses a beat and says, "The kind that blows up."
That was incredible. Yeah, only Rickles. It was perfect.
Yeah.
But so at the very end, there you can see they're looking at the gold, and that's intercut with this celebration that is about to happen. It's almost like intercutting with stuff that hadn't quite happened, where the entire town comes up and surrounds the general, and it's an instant celebration. Oh, and they think the only way they can, the only way that the people in the town will recognize a general is if they call him de Gaulle. Because they
Yes.
just and so this Carol O'Connor's like, okay, I've got to be De Gaulle. It's the only
Yeah. I'll
way.
take it. Just yeah,
I'll
hey.
take it. And so
And
they
so
got
everybody got what they
flags.
wanted by the end of the picture. It seems,
Right,
even
right.
the general.
Even the general didn't get. Yeah. So he's like, so it's like you got this cutting. It's almost like editing of something that's going to happen in 20 minutes, and they're
Yeah.
waving their flag.
Yeah.
And if you notice, so the Americans, and it's interesting. The Americans, they see a young woman, and it's not just a young woman, the typical young woman in a French little town that's been liberated, but there's almost like, hey, soldier, and of course, kind of like what they're thinking that, oh, with this gold
Yeah.
bar, that the life I'm going to have. They cut to the German officer who's just fired the Panzer, and now he's got his gold,
Yeah.
and they cut to in the crowd, there's this little tiny Nazi flag and that a kid's waving. I mean, that would not have really happened in a liberation celebration.
Yeah.
Nobody, they're waving American and French flags, but there's a little, I watched it again to make sure that I see this. It's a little Nazi flag in the corner. And so that's in his mind's eye that, somehow it's not an American flag in the celebration cut to him. That's a weird, that's a
It's a
strange
win for
cut.
the coalition. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that I've always found in
What?
these movies, it seems interesting that these little towns will come up with so many American flags whenever the generals come in. They did that in
Instantly.
Patton. In Patton,
Yeah.
where in Sicily would anybody have an American flag
Yeah. That's
during that year? So
yeah. Yeah.
that was just that's one of the things that they do in the movies. We're not going to talk too much about Patton. That was actually more about an individual than it was about a war,
Right.
and
Right.
Mash, I think falls in with this group, not nearly as it was more of a dark comedy, I think, than
Yeah. Well put.
Kelly's Heroes was, but it had the same kind of. It was a little more forward to being anti-war than Kelly's Heroes was.
Right.
They kind of it's kind of the undertone of Kelly's Heroes, but at the same time in MASH it's more on the surface of just how
Of anti.
but they both dealt with the bureaucracy pretty much in the same way. The cheating at the football game by putting tranquilizer shots to the quarterback of the other team and having the rest of the people on the bench smoking weed and were able to only win this game by cheating, but they got money out of it.
Right. Right.
And there was a great scene where Henry, of course, being the company commander, is the one that has to be the coach of the team, and so Spearchucker gives him some plays that he's worked out, and he says, "Oh, this is wonderful! This is wonderful! What do the little X and O's stand for?"
I forgot about that. What?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And most people forget about what the whole the main character was about, a dentist, Painless the dentist, who was wanting to commit suicide because he had failed to perform in bed one night, and then that was where a lot of it went around, but it was still pretty much in Hawkeye's point of view.
Right. Right.
So
What do you think? Which one feels? Yes, I think you're spot on. MASH feels more anti-war on the nose, like you were talking, and good on the nose in a good way, in a fantastic way.
yeah, yeah.
Which one do you think feels a little bit more? How to put this? Do you think the surgeons? I'm not. The surgeon in MASH. Did they feel more out of time, or does Oddball feel more out of time?
Oh, obviously
Yeah,
Oddball does. I
Exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
certainly, I think only because people aren't as familiar with the Korean War as they were with World War II, based on all the movies were
Right.
made about that, and very few made about Korea, and so it was more. It looked more like what the Vietnam War would have looked like, I think,
Ah,
and
well, yeah,
so
right.
that's where we had that. So it seemed to be kind of in place and kind of, and you take the MASH unit itself, which is not regular army. This is a bunch of surgeons who've been brought together for a medical thing. Had a friend that during World War II worked at a field hospital.
Wow.
He was basically radar. He was
Wow.
the company clerk. He had been injured in Saipan, and so they put him still pretty close to the front lines, but in this field hospital. And he said that what happened in that movie was pretty accurate. In that
Wow.
the doctors got away with stuff because they needed them, and they didn't
Right.
really expect them to be very disciplined on a military manner.
Wow. And so that came from World War II, is it that being
That was World War II. That was a field hospital
World War
then.
II?
So the MASH
That's
unit,
fascinating.
I think the only thing was once again Donald Sutherland, who was in that, is not playing an odd character, but he's still kind of a well, when he's first introduced, they have their moonshine martinis, and he says, "You have any olives?" And Hawkeye says, "Well, we have to make certain adjustments for the war," and Trapper says, "Well, you just can't have a martini without olives." Pulls a jar of olives out of his pocket and then puts the martini glass on the ground and drops it from eye level down into the glass. If they're that rare, that was a risky thing to do. And then later, of course, as they are called to Tokyo to do the surgery on a son of a congressman or something like that. Trapper takes the lead on this, and they say, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm." And they come with golf clubs because they figure they're going to do the surgery and
Sure.
play a round of golf. And so
Yeah.
they come in with golf clubs, and they say, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm the pro from Dover, and this is my favorite caddy," pointing to Hawkeye. Bobby Troop
Wow.
was a Jeep driver that drove them into Tokyo, and the version of the film I saw, everything that he said was bleeped. So that
That's
was
we had that
just a bit
back in
part.
that theater where I was a projectionist. That was God. I've seen it since then, but it's been so long. Yeah, when I was a movie projectionist, we were running MASH, and which would have did you and that came out same year, 1970, as same year as
Yeah,
Kelly's, right?
I think it
Yeah,
did. Yeah.
basically, yeah, really can the oh, what was I gonna? Oh, I know one thing though. Speaking of anti-war films and the messages, one thing I did pick up from the podcast that was covering the script of the film, which is interesting to the script of Kelly's Heroes. Apparently,
Mhm.
there are a couple of versions at the end because it makes you think about what happens. In some respects, you're thinking, are they going to get away with this? How did they get away with this? And it's even based on a true story, Kelly's Heroes, which is incredible.
I didn't
Um,
realize that.
Based on a true story,
Wow.
and one version of the movie, which I think parts of it are based on a true story, but they thought of a version of the film where in the planes, even the planes were fantastic in the film. Accurate. They're talking about wildcats and the plane. The fighters that we see are really good fighters. I mean, some authentic World War II. The tanks look great. Even the tactics of how to kill a Panzer, how to disable a Panzer tank you had to go from behind. Shermans were completely mismatched against Panzer tanks, and so the film is so authentic in so many ways. Well, uh, um, not did I say Wildcat? Not Wild. The plane I'm thinking of is a Thunderbolt. I believe, used near the end of World War II. Big, massive fighter. And they would sometimes have
Yeah.
rockets on these Thunderbolts. Well, here they are in their, I don't want to say, whatever the vehicles that they're taking. Yeah, the big kind of armored carrier, armored personnel car that they're taking, truck to load it up with all the gold. You're thinking, how is this thing even driving? Because it's got so much gold in it. And so they're driving off. And in this alternative version, that the script that they didn't use, a Thunderbolt sees them and attacks it and releases the missile, the rocket, and the last thing you see is the Flash. And talk about a different ending to the film. That would have I don't I really am glad they didn't do that. I would that would I mean it does show the pointlessness of war, but oh by that time of the film you're hoping even Don Rickles, you're hoping he's going to end up setting up his own casino in Reno. What is he going to do with the money? Oddball takes a tank. But I think Oddball later became a motorcycle. He bought a motorcycle to go with that tank and becomes a motorcycle gang leader in the 70s. Of course, he would have been in his 60s in the 70s, Oddball, the character.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
he's 25 and 44, well, he would have been, let's see, no, in the 70s, yeah, he could have been in his 50s, hardcore, he's got the Sherman tank parks. No, that's right. It was a Panzer tank that he took. Good grief. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was looking over some of the trivia stuff that they have on
Yeah,
this, and one of them was that they filmed this in Yugoslavia, and you could find
exactly.
Sherman tanks there still at the time that movie was made, and so they were
Incredible.
able
Yeah.
to rent a number of tanks to do the tank work there, and
Oh, it was, yeah.
yeah, and then in the early part, they're going through the Michelin guide as to where would be good places to go when they go into Nancy.
It's the Michelin
And
Guide.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they said that's actually accurate. That the Michelin guide was in its was a thing then, and that they used those ways in order to be able to navigate their way through the countries to find where they were going in the battle campaigns because they used regular roads, and so
Right. Right. I mean, Fury, it was another good tank film. I was just thinking of the authenticity with the Michelin Guides. Fury from like 2013 or so and in that film they describe what does it take for a Sherman to do in a Panzer. And that's definitely, but that so many, oh God, that's just fantastic. Yeah. When do we see, it's not a, we don't see the cinematographies too is
yeah,
fantastic
it
too.
is.
Yeah, the shots where you have maybe a Jeep and then we pull back and then we see the fighters coming in and
Yeah.
oh, well, when they're shot at, when they're all together, it's this is in the plot of the film when shortly after Joe, Telly Savalas decides to take him, and one of the first things they've got to do is take the small band, take the squad, for lack of a better,
Hmm.
to start to go behind enemy lines, and they're like in a knoll in on a mountain or so up high with some cover from trees, and then a fighter comes in and blasts them. Was that friendly fire too, B,
No,
or was that when the
no,
fighter comes in, or was that
no. The only friendly fire was right at the very beginning of the film,
at the beginning?
and
Okay,
and
so that
then and
was,
then
yeah.
after that, they even pointed out these aren't Mulligan's mortars anymore. These are German 88s.
Yeah, oh, that's
So
right. That's
yeah.
right. Although Mulligan, by the time, he blasted that little town, he overdid it to the point that
Oh
it
yeah.
felt like really fire. Oh, but oh, what a
Well,
good film.
that was something that Big Joe mentions. Is Mulligan gone crazy? He's bombing everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, answering the phone with a bar of gold, that was on Mulligan. He
Yeah,
did not want. He wanted to do this right.
it's done very well. Well, that's Kelly's Heroes in Harm's Way. We pushed into MASH a little bit into Patton, and some of the other war movies that were going on at the time. There were so many of them, though, but I think these were representative of some of the 60s, 70s films that came out, and
Yeah, and I
I
love the way
always
you
liked
point.
them.
And yeah, and I know we need to wrap up, but I just love the way and we can save Where Eagles Dare for another time,
Yeah.
because it is an amazing film. Same director as Kelly's Heroes, also
Yes.
Clint Eastwood. Um, but I like the way you point out, and I hadn't picked it up. I was thinking that In Harm's Way was kind of a piece of like even 50s World War II films. Yeah, but still,
Yeah.
to me, no, there's because Vietnam is starting to be a thing by the time it comes out. Vietnam is on everybody's plate. You know, the 1964, Johnson is assuring us that Tonkin Gulf is not going to turn into anything big, but people are really concerned about Vietnam, and
Right.
there's parts of Vietnam in harm's way. It's really interesting. Yeah, they're really fascinating companion pieces in harm's way and Kelly's Hero, and I'm so grateful to you, B, my friend, for setting me on this journey. Because oh my goodness,
I'm so glad that you agreed to come along because you have the film knowledge that I don't have, but
I
certainly
disagree.
we have a lot of the same taste in it, and that helps.
We
But
do.
yeah, thank you so much. Oh, we're going to do this again next week. You want to talk about Bogart films next week? I think that might be
It
fun.
sounds like we need no bogeys allowed. We need to let's talk
But
about Bogart.
we have what are the good ones? Of course, Casablanca. Of course, The Maltese Falcon, Key Largo,
Ooh, yeah.
Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The African Queen.
Wow. We'll narrow that down to two or three.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
each one. He is basically Bogart, but somehow you believe the characters as well.
But we got to do
I'm always annoyed
Casablanca
about
for
that.
sure.
So that's
Yeah,
that's something we will see next week around this time.
that
So
sounds fantastic.
thank you so much. We'll talk to you in a week. Let's see, what are we doing? Okay. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. Of course, we have still one more Pertwee Doctor Who review coming up on Tuesday and another Babylon 5 on Wednesday. So, and we'll be back here on Thursday. So thank you very much. And until next time, don't